Today is August 2nd, 2007. I am Cassie Potasic, and it is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Dickinson, North Dakota. Can you please tell me your full name?
Julius Miller.
All right. When and where were you born?
I was born May 5th, 1918, out on the farm, my aunt and my uncle's place.
And where was that?
That was, they had a little town there they called Hirschville.
Have you ever heard an interesting story about your birth?
Not really. The only thing is the place I was born was my Aunt Julia, and that's where I got my name from, I think.
Was there a doctor or a midwife?
No, midwife, imagined.
Okay. Can you share some of your earliest memories with us?
Gosh, I don't know. We lived in a homestead. I had 2 rooms. That's where I grew up. And later on we moved to rented a farm later on and had a little bigger house. But we only stayed there a couple of years and then I lost it and it was sold. So we went back to the homestead. And we had 7 kids and the 2 parents, and it was just a small shack, 2-room, probably each room probably 16 by 16. And they had 3 beds in there, and the baby crib, and the heater, and the cook stove, and everything in there. And we stayed there for 2 winters in the summer. And then they bought a different farm to the east there and had a bigger house. And that's where we stayed till we got married. But it wasn't easy to live in that shack. So cold in there. I know one night she had the vinegar jug right next to the stove and it froze. But we were covered with feather ticks and we stayed warm.
Okay. What was it like growing up on the plains?
Well, it wasn't easy, that's for sure. You know, we had to walk to school a couple of miles. We walked a lot. And we never were rich, we were always poor, like most of the German Russians were.
What were winters like?
Oh, they were rough. Lots of snow, cold. And we didn't have the clothes we have now. Nowadays they got some good clothes, you know. And the houses were cold. We were always cold. And walking to school, when we got there, our overshoes usually were froze. Our lunches were froze. We set them by the stove and thawed them out. If we'd forget them out in the shanty, they'd freeze. Sandwiches were froze solid. We laid them on top of the stove and thawed them out. Everybody, we were real lucky. The ones that are set up front by the heater wasn't so bad, but some of them were sitting way back and you could hear them with their feet. They were working their feet because they were cold. You know, we had just a small schoolhouse. A couple of years there, we had 36 kids in there. And they were mostly Scandinavians. We had 2 families there. They were German Catholic. And the rest of them were Scandinavians, Lutherans. And it didn't work out too good. They didn't like us. If that other family, they had 2 boys, they were big for their age. When they were in school, there was peace. But if they didn't come to school, then usually they ended up fighting. They mistreated us. They didn't like that different nationality and different religion, you know. That's why I quit school. That's one reason I quit school when I was in the 7th grade. My parents had separated at that time, and them kids didn't, I don't know, they thought that we were darn fools or something. They didn't approve of that, you know. It was terrible. And then my dad came back that first time we left and sent me to school and said, we can't use you, you're too far behind. So that was it. No more education. And we lived so far from town, the ones that graduated 8th grade, they couldn't afford to go to high school. Some of the Scandinavians, they got a school bus together, and they would go to haul the kids in there with a school bus. But we're too far out of town. We never had a chance. The only ones at high school was my brothers, the 2 of them, the younger ones. And my sister had one of the, what do you call it, AD?
ADD?
Yeah. She took up for a while and got a certificate, high school, but she never went to high school. But the 2 brothers, the younger ones, my mother moved to town, and then they got to go to high school. One got to be a teacher, and the other one didn't go to college, so.
What can you tell me about your family? What kind of person was your father?
He was a real honest, hard-working man. But they didn't get along, my folks. And he started drinking. And that did it. Yeah, he come over here when he was about 17 or 18. And after he was over here a couple of years, he lost both his parents. But he got to go to school for 2 months to the Abbey down there in Richmond. Then his folks died, and he had to go to work, support himself. And he worked for a rancher first, and then a butcher and a railroad and a brickyard, and then finally ended up working for a big rancher for about 3.5 years, and he never spent any money except for clothes. Didn't smoke, he didn't drink. Saved all his money he could. And then he took up a homestead. And then he bacheled for about 3 years. And finally he got married. But how he survived, I don't know. There were no relatives around. He didn't know the neighbors. Just went out there and, with the wagon and the team and settled down. Started building a house. He built a little shed so he lived in, and then he had to dig a well. But the time he got married, he had a couple of cows, male cows, and I think he had 1 hog and a few chickens. That's what he made his living with. But he's a good man. He was quiet. He didn't like to argue. But when he drank, it was just the opposite.
Can you describe your relationship with your father?
It was good. He liked the kids. Yeah, the kids liked him. And he was never rough with us. But we respected him. When he demanded something, we did it immediately. My mother did the disciplining, mostly. But I don't know, they just couldn't get along. I don't know what the problem really was. We never did find out. We have an idea, but we can't pin it down for sure.
You said you were in 7th grade when he left?
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your father?
No, he left and he was gone for 22 years when he came back. And he was an old man. We were all pretty well married. And I don't know if he intended to start over or what, but then he died when he was 73 years old. He died in California. Then we had the body shipped back here and he's buried in St. Pat's Cemetery. But it was rough when he left, I tell you. We darn near starved. That was in 34. The bad dirty 30s, they called them. Boy, I tell you, there wasn't such programs to have nowadays, you know. Everybody got a little bit commodities, you know, once a week, I think it was, for a while. Then we got $80 grant, they called it, relief. Then I had to go to CC's, went to work and send the money home. My sisters did the same. Send the money home for the family so they could live. It wasn't easy, I tell you. But a man that worked so hard, and he was a good man too, and then lose everything. He died broke. Yeah.
Can you tell me about your mother? What kind of person she was?
Well, she was very religious. And she brought us up. She stayed and kept the family together. And then later on she got Alzheimer's. That's what killed her, I guess.
What was your relationship with her like?
We got along real well. Yeah, we were a pretty close-knit family. Even Dad wasn't there, but we accepted it, I guess, as good as we could.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your mother?
She never got remarried. Yeah.
How about your extended family?
You mean the siblings?
No, aunts and uncles or grandparents.
Well, his relatives, we didn't associate with them. after he left. But we had a good relations with her side of the family. But we lived so far out. They lived around Dickinson that we didn't see them very often.
Do you remember your grandparents very well?
No, I saw my grandfather once, and my grandmother, she had Alzheimer's too, so we saw her a couple of times, but we couldn't talk to her or nothing. My mother had a brother, he lived in Montana, and I saw him once. We still don't know the cousins, we never met him. I met one of the girls, but no, we didn't get to see our uncles and aunts too much. We had one uncle living close by, but the others we never saw very much of them.
Which uncle lived nearby?
Uncle Pete. Uncle Pete Berger. He married one of our neighbor girls. He was the youngest of the boys.
What kind of person was he?
Well, he was simple. He never got very far. He was always poor. But he made it. He's raised a family and finally retired. But he wasn't like the rest of them. The oldest one was very aggressive and loud and a very successful farmer. Then he had another brother that he was a very nice man, but not very ambitious.
Alright. Can you tell me about your brothers and sisters?
Well, we got along well. Like, I know most kids, they like to fight, but we didn't do that.
How many siblings did you have?
See ones, I had today, see ones. I had 5 brothers, or 6 brothers, and 4 sisters. Let's see, Anne, Rose, Frances, Eva, Tilly. 5 sisters and 5 sisters and 5 brothers. There were 6 boys and 5 girls.
Can you name all your siblings in birth order?
Yeah, there's Anne, Mary Ann, she was the oldest. And there was Joe, and then me, and then Rose, Francis, Martin, and Tilly, then Eva. Is that 11?
That's 8.
8.
Yeah? You're missing some boys.
Joe, did I have him down? Well, there was me and Joe, Tony and Paul. I didn't list them. There's still one missing.
Yeah.
There's Anne and Rose and Francis and Eva and Tilly. That's 5, isn't it? And there's still a boy missing?
Yep.
Oh, Chris.
Yes.
He's the youngest. No, Paul was the youngest. Chris was. Chris fits in right after Eva. That's Chris and Tony and Paul. They're the 3 last boys. We lost a sister and 3 brothers.
Do you know any interesting stories about any of their births?
Well, Chris was born without a midwife. My dad went to get a midwife, and in the winter time, by the time he came home, he was born. She had bathed him and wrapped him in a blanket. The rest we don't know much about him. Paul, Paul was the only one I think was born in the hospital. The rest of them were all born at home. Not really at home, but without a doctor or anything.
Which one of your siblings were you closest to?
Gosh, I think all of them. I don't know. The younger ones, I was kind of the father to them. We got along real well with each other. But then Joe, he was the same size as I was. He was a year and a half older, but we got along real well with the boys. The girls, we were outside most of the time. And later on, the girls all worked out. They weren't home very much.
What sorts of games did you play?
Oh, golly. In school, we played pum pum pull away and drop the handkerchief. And then we just, I don't know. We had a basketball in school, and we didn't play basketball, but we kicked it around. And then wintertime, we had sleighing. We were sleighing down the hill all the time.
What things did you do for entertainment at home?
Oh, not much. We had a phonograph, a little phonograph. We played that a lot, and then we do a lot of singing. Played some cards. My folks didn't play cards. Never. My dad could play a little bit, but they didn't play cards. And we'd sing a lot. My mother liked to sing.
What songs did she sing?
Usually my mother sang German songs, but then Joe and my brother and I, we sang the English songs. Mostly cowboy songs.
Right. Was it difficult when siblings left home or when new ones came into the family?
When what?
When any of the siblings left home for whatever reason?
No, not really. I went to the CC's and my brother stayed home, took care of the farm. Then I went to Rochester for a while. Then he wanted to join the army, and he thought he'd go in one year, and President promised to go in 1 year and come home. But while he was in, the war broke out. And then he got caught. He was during the whole war he was in the army. And I never got to go. I got married just before the war broke out, and they never bothered me. Because I was the only one home that could run the place. So.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to share about your brothers and sisters?
But what?
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your brothers and sisters?
Not really.
Okay. Well, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Farmer. There wasn't much of a choice. You never went to school. You didn't get an education. And actually, when I was younger in my prime, I wanted to be a prize fighter. I did a lot of boxing. But I found out that I wasn't heavy enough to get the big money. And Rose was against it, my mother was against it. Well, once I got married, I forgot about it. I still box, but mostly with my brother and I.
Right. Where did you go to school?
We went to a country school. They called Ridgeway. They had a nickname for it. They called it the Lone Eagle, because we're sitting on top of a hill.
Can you tell me about the school building?
I don't know how big it was. It wasn't very big. It was 2 rooms and a coal shed. I had a shanty and the big room where we sat. And it was crowded. It was cold. Yeah, it wasn't insulated or anything.
Go ahead.
It's just a big pot-bellied stove, that's all we had for heat.
How did you get to school?
We walked most of the time. And then when Dad was home, he'd haul us when it was real bad, the weather was bad, because he hauled, one winter he hauled grain all winter. He hauled 3,000 bushels of wheat in 16 miles. And it didn't make any difference to the weather. He never had a thermometer. So when he'd go and the weather was real bad, we'd stay home. And otherwise we'd walk. Sometimes it was pretty bad, the weather. But there was we never drove a car in the wintertime. You know, the first snow fell, he put the battery in the basement, and that was it, till Easter. When the weather got nice, he'd start the car. We were lucky to go to church on Easter with the car. If the weather was bad, the roads were bad, we'd go with a team. No, one time he went to Taylor, a load of wheat. We stayed at home that day. When he got in there, there wasn't a soul in the street, and he was afraid it was a holiday. He drove up to the elevator and the doors opened. The elevator man said, "Are you nuts? Why? Do you realize it's 40 below outside?" He froze his nose a little bit in his cheek, but I can't see how he could do that. 40 below. He walked most of the way alongside of the team. No, life wasn't easy. But we didn't know any better, so we accepted it.
Can you tell me about the kinds of chores you had to do?
Chores?
Work you had to do?
Yeah, when we got home from school, we had our work cut out. My job was to carry the coal in and the water. Every fall before school started, we got a pair of new overalls and shirt and shoes and a coat, sheepskin they called them. When we come home, we had to change on the old clothes because these new clothes had to last the whole winter. And then if we had homework, we did our homework by a kerosene lamp.
Did you get a lot of homework?
Not too much, no. Not like they do now. What else you want to know?
Well, why don't you tell me some more about school? What subjects did you have?
Oh, we had them all. The primer and the first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, up to the 8th grade. Geography and civics and history and spelling and arithmetic. And of course we were all in one room, so.
Did you ever have to stay home to work?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Was that pretty common with your other classmates?
Oh, yes. Yeah. We stayed home quite a bit. Like in the fall, thrashing time. We didn't go to school till the thrashing was over with. And then in the spring's work, we sometimes stayed home. Had to do dragging and stuff. Yeah, we had our work cut out. We didn't have any toys. We had a coaster wagon, that's all we had. He didn't believe in toys. Because he said, all you do is ruin them, he said. We made our own toys. Had a bunch of old machinery, we took that apart, and I made myself a tricycle once. 3 different gears, 3 different wheels. I put a motor in out of wood and took some old spark plugs and put 2 spark plugs in there. I watched my dad once, he come from the barn and he passed that tricycle and he just stood there a long time and studied the thing over. He thought I put a motor in. I eavesdropped on him, just telling my uncle, it had looked like a real motor, he said. I thought for sure he's got a motor in there. I always like to putz around with tools. Made all kinds of things out of that old machinery stuff because we didn't have any toys. We had to make our own.
Now, when you went to school, what language did they speak?
They were English. They didn't dare to speak German. The first school we went to, they were all German kids. Even the teacher was German, but we couldn't talk German. We had to talk English. But it didn't take long before we caught on. We had to. No, we couldn't talk at all English at all when we started school. So we moved up to the other farm, and then they were all English-speaking kids. They were the third generation. We were the second generation, but they were the third generation. It was their great-grandparents that come over. So they made fun of us. They called the Russians. That was a common thing. The dumb Russians. The dirty Russians. They had all kinds of names for us.
And then later you went to a school that was largely Norwegian families?
Well, the second school we went to, yeah, they were all Scandinavians. Mostly Norwegians. There was one Swede. The Myrons are Swedes.
Did they make fun of you too?
Oh yes, they all made fun of us. No, if it would have turned out pretty good if that other German family went to school. But they didn't care to go to school, so they missed a lot of school. None of them, they had 14, 15 kids. None of them graduated from the 8th grade. Most of them didn't have any school at all, the older ones. So they quit school early. They just didn't learn anything. The whole family had this problem. They couldn't learn anything. They'd go to school and they just didn't catch on. They'd supposed to get 10 words to learn to spell. They never learned them. They'd practice them, but they couldn't. And one guy, he cheated one day. He copied them on the desk. And then, of course, he'd go like this, and he'd look, and he'd copy that. Teacher caught him at it. And what he got on her arm? Nothing. She raised the arm, and he had all the words to copy down there. Well, she said, "You're going to get an F now." And the other, his brother, he just never learned nothing. Not a thing. He couldn't even write a check. No, if they'd have went to school with us, I would have passed my 8th grade. I just didn't care to go to school with that situation going on.
What else do you remember about school?
Pardon?
What else do you remember about school?
Well, we had poor teachers. At one time we had a young gal, and she was about 18 or 19. Then we had a fella running the country, around the country, and he was a wheeler dealer. He always had money. He was single, he was divorced. One night he took her to Taylor, school teacher, brought her home, and drunk. We were all waiting for her. We were standing on the porch waiting for the teacher. He helped her up the steps. She started school. And then she took the two oldest girls for teachers. And then she put coats behind the heater and laid down and went to sleep. She slept till noon. Oh, them guys, them old boys, they just almost tore that school apart. The next night he was back again to get her, but this time she didn't get drunk. She was a good-looking gal. And he always had different women and always good cars and a lot of whiskey. And he always made money somehow. He was a bootlicker for a while. Well, no, these teachers, they didn't go to college like they do now. Oh, we had some good teachers too, maybe one or two of them. I think what they did, they went to high school and then they went to normal school over summer and then they were qualified. And that's one thing, we didn't learn much. They were not strict. We had one of them that married one of our neighbors. She was a really good teacher. She was strict and she was well educated. And we had very little about hot lunches. She'd make bean soup or pea soup or something like that. Not all the time. Nowadays they got everything in school. They got hot lunches, and our daughter cooks for school in New England. God, I look at her menu and they're feasting all the time compared to what we had. And school was not that important them days. If you had 8th grade, you were well educated. I went to the CCs, I took up 7 and 8th grade subjects there, and they promised us a diploma in the spring if we attended all the classes. Well, I didn't. On spring came, there was about 10 of us, ended up 10 of us, that didn't have the 8th grade. And they broke their promise. They said, well, I don't think you should have an 8th grade diploma. My brother Chris was pretty slow, and they kicked him out of school. They said, you can't come to school, you can't learn fast enough. Well, I don't know, the Meyer boys that one of us were shape, but they kept him for some reason, I don't know. They weren't very tough as far as going to school. You miss school, well, you miss school.
What was your favorite memory about school?
Gosh. Well, when there was a time that we did get along with the Scandinavians when we were younger. And I liked school then. But the older we got, the worse it got. The funniest thing after we got out of school, we got along real well. When we meet at dances and so on, we were friends. So I don't know what the heck the problem was.
Is there anything else you'd like to share about school?
No, not really.
Okay. And can you tell me some more? We started talking about chores. Can you tell me more about the things you had to do around the house?
Well, we didn't have any housework, like with dishes and stuff. We didn't have to do that. Except for the coal and the water, and we did all the chores outside. When we got older, we had to do all the chores outside. Dad was good. Pardon?
Taking care of animals and things?
Yeah. When Dad was gone, of course it was up to me and my brother to take care of the animals. Had to feed them, make the hay and all that stuff.
Did you do any milking?
Oh yes. Yeah, I started milking, I don't know how old I was. My brother and my sister were older, so they did the milking for a while. My job was to get the cows, tie them up, and if we grained them, I had to grain them. And then carried the milk over. We had our separator over in the house, so we had to carry the milk over. We had two little pails, and I would carry the milk over. We had to milk by hand for a long time. We never had a machine on the farm. After I started farming myself, we got a machine. We had about 18 cows on the farm when we were home, and about 18 horses. I don't know how in the world they all found pasture, them animals.
Why did you have so many horses?
That's what we worked with till I was, 1927, he bought a tractor. No, he did everything with horses when we were kids. And then when he got a tractor, he got rid of about half of them. And that was too many. We should have gotten rid of all of it except the team. Could have had more cows, you know. And we thrashed bundles. We bindered everything. And then finally we got a header. Then we had header stacks, but sometimes we'd have the thrashers there for a week or 10 days. And there was 12, 14 people. My mother cooked for them. They had 5 meals a day. At breakfast, it's about 7 in the morning. Then they had lunch at 9, and then dinner, and then lunch at about 3, and then supper again. And no refrigerator or deep freeze.
How did you keep things cold?
Root cellar. A day or two before the thrashers came, my dad come home and took a day off and butchered a hog, ground it all up and made meatballs and put it in the crock and poured fat over them. That's the way they kept them for a week, 10 days. So the thrashers got a lot of meatballs. Then if it rained, they'd go to town, you know, and they'd get some sausage and stuff. I don't know, that was tough. Nowadays, you couldn't live without a refrigerator and a deep freeze. I don't know how in the world we ever got by.
Now you mentioned butchering. Did you do that lots of times during the year, or was there one set time?
No, usually in the fall. Then during the summer, we'd butcher a young hog, and then we'd have chickens, you know, for meat. But in the fall, we'd butcher half a dozen hogs or so, and put them in brine, cured it, and then smoked it, and hung it in the granary or root cellar. Then we'd run out of meat about the 1st of July, and then the chickens were about ready, and then the pigs were big enough to butcher. And I'm sure we ate a lot of meat that was questionable.
Did you just butcher as a family, or did neighbors come over?
Yeah, my uncles usually help butcher. One man, you know, usually, and then sometimes the neighbors would come over and help. And my dad wasn't too much as far as exchanging labor. He said, I don't like it because when you have a neighbor help me, I got to help back. And it might be just at the time I can't do it or shouldn't be doing it. And when we got older, then we butchered ourselves.
Did you also make sausage then?
Oh, we made a lot of sausage, all kinds of it. Head cheese and blood sausage and liver sausage and country style.
Do you remember how you made any of it?
Oh, we still do once in a while. Don't make the sausage, we make patties now. Sometimes I buy some cheap pork and beef and grind it up, and then we'll mix it and make breakfast meat. In them days, you just smoked it, and like the sausage, and you hang it in the granary. We had sausage all winter. That had to be froze, of course, pretty well. So we had to eat it before it got warm. Yeah, that was a big job. Cut up the meat and then grind it. Usually the next day at home, we'd stay at home and ground the fat. That was a big job. My mother would use the cracklings and stuff and make soap. Put lye in it, make soap, lye soap.
What was your family's attitude towards alcohol?
Well, we didn't use much alcohol except Dad, and he didn't use much either till he got in trouble. Then he started drinking. But it was used in the family. My mother never spent any money for alcohol, but she would take a glass of wine. My sisters didn't do much drinking. The boys did some, when we got older. But my sisters didn't drink.
Did you ever make your own alcohol?
My dad did. Made wine and beer, mostly wine.
Do you remember how he made it?
Yeah, I still remember how they made it. My dad would buy raisins with seed in it, the big raisins. And then he'd soak them in the water, put yeast in a little bit, sugar, ferment it. When it was through fermenting, he would put the raisins in the sausage stuffer and press them out, press the juice out. And the beer, they went the same way. Put it in the jug and in the crock, fermented it and then bottled it. Put it under the bed, and if one would pop, it was time to put them in the root cellar. That stuff was wild. He'd open up a bottle and have the pitcher ready, water pitcher, and let it go in there because it'd shoot. It's pretty strong. Never made whiskey. My uncle did, but he never made it.
Were there any other things that your family made for themselves like that?
Well, as far as food goes, we didn't do much canning till the girls got older. So in the wintertime, we wouldn't get too much vegetables. We'd put cabbage wrap it in paper and put it in the crock. And sometimes we make a lot of sauerkraut. Had a 20-gallon crock. And the folks would shred it. I had to wash my feet and go in there and stomp it down. Funny that I didn't fall out of that crock, because we went around and around, stump it, and I had the cleanest feet in the country. They put that salt in there. And the tighter you could pack it, the better it would last, the longer it would last. So we had a lot of pork and sauerkraut. Called it in German, they call it Speck. It was the fat. Speck and sauerkraut. We didn't dare to throw the fat away. We had to eat it. Nowadays they don't dare to eat it. My dad loved this stuff. They'd make a ham, and it had fat about so thick. It was smoked, cured, slice it down, and eat that fat with, slice it, and eat the fat with the lean meat. Never threw anything away. Not even the rind we threw away. We made head cheese out of that.
So what were some of your favorite foods?
I like the sausage. I like pork. I liked all the meat, chicken, and very seldom got beef. Then she made some stuff out of flour and milk and eggs, I liked some of that stuff. I was not a finicky eater. My brother was, but I ate everything my mother made.
Is there anything else you remember about the foods you ate growing up?
Pardon?
Is there anything else you remember about the foods you ate growing up?
Not really.
Right.
In the mornings, of course, we had cereal and sausage, usually little sausage or bacon. My dad couldn't work unless he had meat. Being that we're Catholic, Friday was a bad day for him. He claimed if he worked hard, he got shaky without meat.
Now, were Sunday meals different than the weekday meals?
Well, on Sunday we usually get chicken soup for dinner. They butcher them old chickens away, and then they butcher them old chickens and make soup. My mother was a good cook. She believed in doing everything well, like the meat well.
Right. Can you tell me about the clothes you had when you were growing up? Were any of them handmade?
When we were kids, they were little kids, No, we didn't get many clothes. We had one suit to wear for church, and that was it. Usually one shirt, a white shirt, and a tie, and then a suit. And every day we had to wear a few clothes, We got one pair of overshoes. They had to last all year.
Did you have to wear hand-me-downs?
No, not so much, because my brother was the same size as I was. By the time we were through with him, there was nothing left anyhow. The girls was a little different. They wore hand-me-downs. And the younger boys, maybe, not very often. And there were no rummage sales either. God, now you go to a rummage sale, there's clothes. All the clothes I wear now come from a rummage sale. Every piece. We got some awful nice clothes. I bought some Western shirts one time, several of them for $1 a piece. They were brand new.
How many pairs of shoes did you have
Pair of shoes, one pair.
for the whole year?
Well, two pair, one for Sundays and one for every day. Yeah, that's all we had, two pair of shoes.
All right. When did you get electricity?
Oh golly, that was after we moved out on a farm in New England. I was probably 1950.
Okay.
That was a wonderful thing that happened to us that time. We got electricity.
Changed your life?
Huh?
It changed your life?
Well, pretty well so. We didn't have to start the engine to pump water no more. And lights, we had beautiful lights, you know. And then in '63 we built a new house. And what I like best about the new house is the bathroom, the shower. Boy, that used to be terrible. You had to carry water in and heat it and carry it out. Yeah, that really changed everything when we got a new house. We got a forced air furnace, and it was warm all the time in the house. Before we wake up in the morning and we were just shaking, you know, so cold. I don't know if Rose told you one time that the window fell out on the house while we were sleeping. That old house we moved into when we bought the place. It was so cold in the house and we couldn't figure out what in the world is. The wind's not blowing. The windows, they haven't got that much frost on them. How come it's so cold? I sat up and looked out, no window. The window was right by the whole frame and everything had fallen out in the snow. So we were sleeping with the window open in the middle of winter. So I got up and fixed the window and she made breakfast. The kids never noticed it. Then the next winter we fixed the house up a little bit, and every year we'd do some remodeling and fixing, and then when we had it all remodeled and fixed, we built a new one. But it's amazing what a new house can do, a good house, with electricity and the heater system and everything. We never put in air conditioning though. We had a window air conditioner, you know, in one room, the front room. Otherwise we just braved it through. It wasn't just too bad in that new house, you know, but in the old house, it was insulated. Like when we grew up, we didn't have insulation in the house. We slept upstairs. That was terrible sometimes. We laid there a long time, and every evening we couldn't go to sleep. It was so hot.
Do you remember getting your first car or truck?
You mean when we were kids? Oh yeah, a Model T in the fall of 1925. My dad was scared of the darn thing. he brought it home, and when he bought it, he took a ride to town with the salesman. And then he told him, here it is. I showed him how to run it. He got on the thing and drove high all the way home. And never again could he do that. He said, I don't know what happened. I just drove on, and I was scared to push the pedal, and barely made it up the hills, he said, but I made it. He probably drove faster than he thought he was. But that car, after 6 years, was just like new. He was so proud of that car.
What did you use the car for?
Pardon?
What was the car used for?
Just for town and church, you know. We very seldom went visiting. With all them little kids, I guess they just didn't think it was worth it.
Now you mentioned, I think it was 1927 when you got your first tractor?
Yeah, in the spring of 27.
What kind of tractor was it?
It was a John Deere D, 3-bottom plow with it. Paid $1,400 for the whole outfit. Now you can't even buy a tire on them big tractors for that. I know one of our neighbors broke a spindle on his John Deere and had a bigger tractor, and it cost him $1,600 for just that spindle. So
Did that really change how your family worked on the farm?
Pardon?
Did the tractor change how your family worked?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, gosh, there was a difference. My dad farmed 300 acres that time, and then with the horses, he would start disking, and when the weeds got too big, he'd plow. But mind you, plowing 150 acres with 4 horses, God, he was almost on that plow day and night. And you couldn't do that with a tractor. You could work nights, but with horses you couldn't do that. They never did. No, he'd get up in the morning at 5 o'clock and get on the tractor. Before that, he had to get up earlier than that and then feed the horses and get things ready. By 7 o'clock, usually he was out in the field. And then he'd go till dark. But with the tractor, you could get something done. Yeah. No, he was a good worker. He'd be out there all day long. Every day he'd do something. In the winter time, same way. He'd haul grain all the winter. We had a crop. Like a winter we had last winter, that would have been nice. But we didn't get them winters. There was always a lot of snow and blizzards. And yeah, I don't know. Things changed. Now they got machinery 30 feet wide, combines. I had a combine that was 6.5 feet wide.
Well then, do you remember when you got your telephone?
Yeah, it was not long after we got electricity. Yeah, and then it was everybody could listen to what you had to say for a while. Finally, they've changed that.
Did that change how you kept in contact with people? Or?
Yeah, we kind of kept in contact with the neighbors more, and you could call, and the kids went to St. Mary's in New England, and we could call in and make contact with them if you had to, or they could call out. Made a lot of difference. Made life easier.
Right. Well, let's talk about church a little bit. How important was religion to your family when you were growing
Oh
up?
golly, we never missed church. Never missed unless the weather was bad or we got sick, we had the flu or something.
Where did you go to church?
About 3 miles from home.
What was the name of the church?
It was St. Philip's. St. Philip's Catholic Church.
Did you sit with your family when you went to church?
Yeah, we went to, if the weather was bad, we'd go with the team, you know. And after a while, we'd go with the car as long as we could. Sometime even in the middle of the winter, when Dad was gone, we'd get the Model T started. We had no top on it towards last, so we sat out there in the cold. Yeah, I used to go 35 miles in the wintertime to Dickinson. Just bundled up and got behind the windshield, took off.
Were you baptized or confirmed?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's the first time anything was recorded, when we got baptized. When we got Social Security, or wanted Social Security, we had to prove that we were alive. We had to get three things. Like we got the marriage certificate and a CC, discharge, and confirmation papers.
Was there a large ceremony for?
Pardon?
Was there a large ceremony for confirmation?
Yeah. Yeah, we had to go to Bible school or Sunday school, they called it, for 2-3 weeks. And then the bishop would come out and confirm us. There was about, must have been 15, 20 kids.
Did you have a celebration at home?
No, not really. It was just church, and we got confirmed, and that was it. We didn't even have a picture taken. Had no camera. When I was in the CCs, I bought a camera, 36. That's the time we started taking pictures of the family.
When you went to church, was German spoken in the church?
It was till, let's see, once about 38, 39, they switched over. the German priest left, and then they got another one that was mostly English. By the time we got married, it was all English. No German no more. That was in 41.
How did your family view people of other faiths?
How what?
How did your family view people of other faiths?
How we got along?
Yeah.
The neighbors were okay. One year my dad thrashed with the Scandinavians. Took about a whole month they were together. They got along. No, we got along with the neighbors. It was just school when we got in about the 5th grade or so, and then things started happening.
All right.
But the neighbors, we got along real well with the neighbors. We didn't have any Scandinavians living close by. But after we got out of school, we associated with the kids. Some even married German Russians. Some of them, they made fun of the German Russians all the time, and then ended up getting married. That one Myron girl, she got married to a Catholic. And the old man said, if you marry that man, you can leave and never come back. That's what she did. When he died, she come back, went to his funeral. But I don't know, they never would say, do that to us though, about religion. They'd never argue with us about religion. The folks wouldn't.
Is there anything else you remember about church when you were growing up?
Well, we had a German priest, and he was a Hitler. Boy, he was tough. He had a temper, something terrible. You had to, when he says, go, you go. When he said, stop, you stop. And if not, he'd be right on your collar. No, he wasn't bashful. One Sunday, he beat up on some kids with the book because they whispered. And he said, I can see you guys. I got eyes in the back. But he noticed that they were whispering, you know, and when he was praying, he had a big book, and he come back there and he just beat on their heads. No, they weren't bashful, them priests. They were strict. Not all of them, but most of them, especially the ones German ones that were brought up German, like this one here came from Germany. And he was tough. He was there 10 years.
Remember anything else?
Not really.
All right. Well then, can you tell me how you celebrated holidays?
Celebrate holidays?
Yeah.
Well, church holidays. I went to church. 4th of July. 4th of July, when we got older, we'd go to town on 4th of July. They usually get together by the Knife River, the whole neighborhood, shoot firecrackers and have picnics.
How about Christmas? Can you tell me about Christmas?
There wasn't much going on for Christmas. We went to church midnight mass usually. Drove with the team, colder than the dickens. But we didn't get toys at Christmas, except when we got them from school. Exchanged names, we got a little toy, but we got a bag with peanuts and nuts, you know, and an orange, and no bar candy, hard candy we got. And we were happy with that.
Were there any other Christmas traditions?
Well, school programs. They had programs from school. They had celebrated.
Did you celebrate Christmas with your extended family or just with your brothers and sisters?
Just brothers and sisters now.
Right.
Christ's child would come and give us a bag of nuts, and that was it. Call it a Christkindl.
All right. How about Easter? How did you celebrate Easter?
The colored eggs, and stuff like that. Baked some Easter bread. It was another church holiday. No, my mother believed in going to church. Never missed a Sunday unless we got flu or blizzarding, something like that. If it got too cold, she sent us boys, you go and bring the blessing home. We had to go with the team. And we didn't dare to make the horses run because they'd sweat and then they'd get sick. So on the way home we did, but not on the way up. That 2 miles or 3 miles, that seemed such a long way.
Well, did you celebrate birthdays or names days?
Well, my mother never did. She'd tell us your birthday is today. But when the girls got older, they usually baked a cake, later on when we had ice cream and cake. In school, some of the kids had birthdays, the parents would bring a cake.
Did you celebrate any other holidays or events? Thanksgiving or
Yeah,
Valentine's
Thanksgiving. Not my folks so much. After the kids got bigger, we'd celebrate Thanksgiving. And then later when we got married once, we never missed it. We always had the family, together and had Thanksgiving. Yeah, we changed a lot of things when we got married. Birthdays were always celebrated. Thanksgiving and even Easter, Christmas, New Year's. My folks weren't much for that stuff. Cost money.
Do you remember anything else about celebrations that you'd like to share with us?
Well, the weddings, of course, were big celebrations. Oh.
Can you tell me about a typical wedding?
Pardon?
Can you tell me about a typical wedding?
Well, they go to church, get married in church, and then they'd come home and go to the bride's place and start drinking beer or whiskey and beer. On our wedding, we only had half a gallon of wine. That's all we had. They passed that around. Then they had a big dinner, and then they'd sing and dance a little in the afternoon, and then the evening, our wedding, we went to town. But that was a terrible day. Sleet and ice, snow and rain. When we went to Gladstone that night for the dance, we had about a half an inch of ice on the highway. And we had a very good crowd. They usually danced till 12, 1 o'clock or 2, and then that was it. But in the early days, they'd have weddings at home to dance and everything. But we rented a hall in Gladstone, paid $20, and then we paid $20 for a 5-piece orchestra.
Is there anything else you'd like to share about your wedding?
Well, for dinner, we had a very few people. I think they had 3 chickens they prepared for the dinner. Neither my wife and I drank or smoked, so. Not even for the dance, we didn't even drink for the dance. Like her sisters and brothers, they were about half cocked when their wedding.
Did you go on a honeymoon?
Yeah, in my mother's upstairs bedroom. No, it was bad. The weather was bad, and we were broke anyway. No, we never went to a honeymoon. We stayed with my mother the first year because they needed my help. So. No, but all got it different. Nowadays they spend thousands of dollars for a wedding. We have a granddaughter getting married in Nebraska. I bet you she's going to spend at least $10,000. The dress costs several $100s. And my suit, I paid $14 for my suit. Wedding rings, we had wedding rings, but I think they were $3, $4. And they were gold. Mine only lasted 3 years and I wore it out. It was so soft, much gold in there.
Is there anything else you remember that you'd like to share?
About the wedding?
Yeah.
No, that's just that the weather was so bad. And the darn car went to heck. The best man hauled us to church and hauled us to the dance and brought us home. Car worked good all the time except the wedding morning.
Well then, I'm going to change topics a little bit. I'm wondering if you can tell me some more of what you remember about the Dirty 30s.
Well, I'll tell you that you think it was hot now. It was hotter then. Dry, grasshoppers. and the prices were bad. One year we had a nice crop, and it burned up in one day. Grasshoppers were so bad they ate everything. They ate the bands out of your straw hat. If there was sweat, it was wet. That's what they're looking for. They ate the pork handles. They ate the soft wood out of the pork handles. Same with the fence posts. They'd eat the soft wood out of the fence posts. They were so thick you could hardly see the sun one day. We heard a heck of a roar, and we rushed out and looked, and here you could hardly see the sun. It was just like a blizzard. It was so terrible. They ate up everything. There wasn't much to begin with. They have very little green grass or anything, but they ate it all up. Them were the tough days, them 30s. Dust storms. If you had thistles along the fence line, they'd get buried. The thistle would catch the dust, pile it up. Next spring they had to go out and shovel the dirt away from the fence. No money. Roosevelt days. Then we had a Hoover for president, and he just didn't do a thing. Things were so bad, and he said they were going to straighten out by themselves. We don't have to do anything. And when Roosevelt again, he changed everything. We sold cows. In 1935, we sold cows for $15 a piece, and calves for $5. It was terrible. No, nothing to eat for them. No pasture, no hay. Cows are dying. We usually had 20 cows or something like that, or 25, and we ended up with 7 cows left. Then in 30, 39, 37 even, things got a little better. And from there on, it got better and better. In the 40s, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful time in farming. Prices were good. We had good crops. Paid for the farm in the 40s.
Do you remember the WPA?
Oh, I worked in it too, some, not very much, but I worked in the WPA. Yeah, that's the way they made their living. That wasn't very much. Worked with horses. Scrape it, used horse equipment, WPA. Scrapers, horse scrapers, and then we had hauled gravel. They called scoria, and gravel with horses. Shovel it both ways. I got out there when it's cold. My brother had to do that mostly. It was cold in the mornings, and oh, he was so grouchy. He had to get up and leave at the dark and come home in the dark.
Can you tell me a little more about your work experiences during this time?
I'd what?
Can you tell me more about your work experiences during the Dirty 30s?
Well, there wasn't much to do on the farm, you know. We had a very few cattle, and harvesting, haying was tough. We'd cut thistles, green thistles, and stack them. Grass green, just cut them and stack them. They didn't spoil. Same with sweet clover. If you had sweet clover, you could cut it and stack it the same day. You know, it was tough. We had to make a loan every spring for gas and seed. There's years you wouldn't even get your seat back. We had a neighbor there, he summer fellowed. He was the only one. He always had a little seat to sell. Yeah.
Is there anything else you remember about the 30s?
Not really.
All right. Well, then, what was your most stressful childhood memory?
The what?
Your most stressful childhood memory, your hardest memory?
Well, I suppose it was when we got married and after we started farming. We had very little money. We rented. Lots of work and no pay. Luckily, we got crops. And we rented from a guy from this Fridley that got the school mom drunk. And he was so damn tough. He wanted everything his way, and that was it. We worked with him for 3 years, and I made enough money to buy some land. And that was so tough. We down there starved the first couple of years. We got hailed out the first year, dried out the second year. The third year we had a terrible winter. And then the fourth year we got a crop. And I sold everything I had, all my crop, and paid my income tax. And then I went across the street to the bank and borrowed money to live on for the rest of the year. Otherwise, we got along pretty good.
Well, what was your happiest childhood memory?
Oh, golly. We were pretty happy. Although we were poor church mice, but we didn't know any different. No, I think after we retired the first few years. And the new house, we really enjoyed that new house.
Right. Well, is there anything about your childhood that you would like to add? Anything else?
Not really.
Okay. Well then, can you tell me a little bit about the World War II?
Well, we got married in November, and then the December war broke out, and we were just married, of course, and I didn't have to go to war because I had to stay home and take care of the farm. My other brothers were too young, and the older one was in the army. And they never bothered me much. I never even got to go to Fort Snelling to get examined. So I didn't know whether I was 4F or what. So I got by there. I wish I could have went to the army later on, end of the war. But we had already 2, 3 kids then. Yeah. And after we bought the farm, of course, then we were farmers. I had a brother-in-law that had to go. He was single. Oh, he was married. But I don't know why they drafted him. He had to serve his 18 months.
Did speaking German cause a problem for you during the war?
Pardon?
Was it difficult for you because you spoke German during the war?
Well, not so much. Some. But in school, that's when it bothered mostly. Because we couldn't talk English.
Were you embarrassed to speak German or ashamed during the war?
Well, I don't know. They didn't like it. Of course, I don't know. We just never made too much contact with outside world. My folks went to the stores where they talked German. We had one in Taylor, German man. Dickinson, they had a couple of Jews up here and they talked German. Then we had Sheelers, he was German. So we didn't do much business with the Scandinavians or English or the French or whatever.
Did rationing during the war affect your family?
The what?
Rationing during the war?
Oh yeah, we had to ration the gas and the meat, and of course meat we had our own on the farm, but the gasoline and tires, coffee, the sugar was all rationed. But the farmers weren't that bad off as gasoline concerned, and they had their own meat.
Is there anything else you remember about the war?
No, just this rationing, that was the bad part of it. That was the tough part of it. We got along pretty good. We had these kids, we had little kids, and they got, as far as I remember, I think they got the same thing we did. So the sugar and the coffee, they had no problems.
Right. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Okay.
Had a pretty dull life.
I don't think so. You have lots of great stories.
Pardon?
You have lots of great stories.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think it's important to tell your life story?
Well, I don't know. Some of these days the kids will have to will like it, and when we are gone, things are going to change a lot. A lot of these kids nowadays don't even know how we lived, how tough it was. We never had an abundance of anything. We always had plenty of food. except the 30s, it was tough. We found out for sure what it's like to if you don't have a father in the house. Provider, he was a good provider. My dad was a good provider. He always had plenty good food. In the fall, he'd get 10 sacks of flour and coffee, big bag of coffee, and sugar, in case it storm in, you know.
Go ahead.
We didn't get to town like they do now all the time. If we don't get to the grocery store for a week, we got a problem. We never ate in the cafes, even after we got married, till later on, you know. In the 50s we started eating out, but not very often. We usually went to town, we bought some wieners and bread and pop, and that was our dinner. Couldn't even afford $1 for a meal. Especially with kids, you know. We couldn't take them to a cafe.
Are there any other thoughts or observations you'd like to share?
Not really.
Well, thank you so much for doing this with us.
You're welcome.
All right, Julius, can you tell me about this picture?
Well, this is my grandmother.
Okay.
Rose is her name. And that's Antauchuch. And that's his wife, Isabella.
And how are they related to you?
Well, she's my mother's sister, his aunt.
Okay. Were you very close to them growing up?
Pardon?
Were you very close to them growing up?
Lived close by, you mean? No, they lived south of Dickinson. And we lived up there north of Gladstone, so we only seen them once in a while. She got to be, 99, I think it was, years old.
Wow.
It was a nursing home for about 40 years. There's an uncle and aunt. This is my mother's sister. And he was married once before, but his wife died and he had several kids. So they ended up having a big family. And he served in the legislature several terms in Bismarck.
Okay.
I don't know all their names.
It's a big family.
Oh, it is. And this is actually a Berger family. But her husband died, and then she married him later on. So there's some half-sisters and half-brothers.
All right.
She was married to my mother's brother. And that's the same family, same couple on the front there. Anton Schuch and his wife, kids. And that's a sister, my mother's here. That's her husband. And there's, what the heck, it's John Hushka. And this is one of my uncles. It's the youngest, my mother's brothers.
This is their wedding picture?
Yes. And his name is Peter. And there's another Rose.
Yeah.
They had a small family. They only had 3 kids.
All right.
This is my dad's brother,
What's his name?
Frank Miller.
Do you remember anything about him?
Well, he went to, after his parents died, he went to Chicago. And he got caught pneumonia and died down there. Never was married.
Okay.
And that's my dad here and his 3 brothers.
Can you tell me their names?
This would be Frank,
Okay.
and then Jacob,
All right.
and Christ or Christian.
Okay.
Frank went in the army and he got killed in No, Jacob went into the army and got killed in France. So he's buried there. And Chris was the only brother left. He lived about 9 miles from us.
Did you know him well? growing up?
Quite well, yeah. Yeah, he's the one that had that daughter about 10, 12 years later after they quit having kids, and that she come along.
Okay. All right.
That it?
What this
Oh, that's a Valentine Schoch family.
How are they related?
He's a cousin of mine. I don't know much about him. They moved away after he got married. I think they moved to Montana.
Okay.
He went for a priest, and he didn't like it, so he quit and come home and got married. Never got to be a priest.
All right.
This is Jacob. He's in the army, that probably taken in France, I don't know.
Your father's brother.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet him?
No, he was dead before I was born. Nobody knows much about him. I mean, how he died or anything like that. And this is my dad's youngest sister.
And what's her name?
Her name is Rose. Rose. And Martin Steckler. Got married to Martin Steckler.
Okay. Did you know her?
Yeah, he lived here in Dickinson, but we didn't see him very often. He just had a job here in Dickinson, some different kind of jobs.
All right.
This here is my dad's oldest sister that was here in the States. He had two other sisters, but they stayed in Russia. I think they were married and they stayed there. What happened to them, we don't know. That was Adam.
Adam.
Adam Wilhelm.
Were you very close to them growing up?
Nah, not too much. Them days, we had the Model T. First of them, we had the team. Very seldom made contact with any of the relatives. I think my mother was married 11 years before she went back and seen her parents.
Oh, wow.
Because they had the buggy, that's all they had to drive. That's my folks. Martin and Matilda. Her maiden name was Berger. I think they got married in 1911. No, that was later than that. I don't even remember. I don't remember. And that's Peter Miller. That's the oldest of his brothers that are here. No, let's see once. No, he was not the oldest.
Were you living close to this?
Well, they were about 6-8 miles from us. But he was a half-brother of my dad. We saw him quite often. He moved around a lot, never stayed too much in one place.
Were you close to any of these?
No, I couldn't do it. Well, I could tell you this is the oldest one. His name was Peter, too.
All right.
And her name was Schmidt. Marion Schmidt. I don't know how we got a hold of her. She was from Mandan. And he was a farmer. That's about it.
All right.
And that's Chris and his wife Juliana. As far as I know, I was born at their place. That's where I got my name from. Yeah. He was a little younger than my dad. He was quite a successful farmer. And they're the parents of that girl that come later, And that's my folks over there. A different picture. It's a full-length picture of them.
Of your parents?
My parents, yeah.
All right.
I have a lot more relatives, but they're not here in pictures. We haven't got pictures of them.